Hello, dear friends. It is now Motzei Shabbat of Shabbat Hagadol, and Shabbat Hagadol is usually the Sabbath before Pesach, before Passover. It's referred to Shabbat Hagadol, and it's usually understood as the Great Sabbath. And there are various interpretations that are given about why it's called the Great Sabbath. It follows the 4 weeks that predated Passover, which is called Shkalim, Zachor, Para HaChodesh, where we talk about, and I think I mentioned this already in another video, and then the 5th one being Parshat Shabbat HaZachor. So Shkalim, the half shekel, and Zachor, remembering Amalek. Para is where we read about the ceremony of the heifer of purification before Passover, and a Chodesh, which we read as we approach the first day of Nisan, the month of the spring, and the month of Pesach. And then the Sabbath right before Pesach is called Shabbat Hagadol. Now, I want to clarify something that I think the simple meaning behind Shabbat Hagadol is what we read in the Haftarah from the prophets, the 3rd chapter of Malachi. Because at the end of that chapter that we read, it says, Hine anochi sholech lachem et Eliyahu Navi, lifnei bo yom Hashem hagadol v'hanora. On that day I shall send to you Elijah the prophet before the great day of God, the great and awesome day of God. So it says that the great and awesome day of God. So the Gadol seems to refer to the great and awesome day of God. How do I know this? Not only because it's written in the Haftorah, but if you look at the 4 predating Parshiot, the names of those Sabbaths were basically based on what we read in the Torah and what we read in the prophets, the Haftorah. So therefore, this Sabbath, it's true, there's nothing special that we read from the Torah and Shabbat Hagadol, but there is something special that we read from the prophets, which is not the regular Haftarah of this week, which happens to be Parashat Tzav in Vayikra in Leviticus. Secondly, the Shabbat Hagadol could not be describing the Sabbath itself because of this, because it says Shabbat Hagadol, and Gadol is in the masculine, and Sabbath is in the feminine. So if it was describing the Shabbat as being the Shabbat of grandeur or the great Sabbath, it would have to be Shabbat Hagadolah. Just to give you another example, and therefore it makes more sense that it's the Shabbat of the Yom Hagadol, the Sabbath of that great day, where we meditate upon that great day. And I'll explain why in a moment. But let me give you another example of this where we have misunderstandings. For instance, Jerusalem is called Ir HaKodesh, which means, we usually think it means the holy city. However, in Hebrew, Ir again is in the feminine, and Kodesh is in the masculine. So it's not Ir HaKodesh, the holy city, but it means Ir HaKodesh, the city belonging to the Holy One. Who is the Holy One? Jeremiah tells us, Go'alenu Adonai Tzevaot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael, which means, redeem us, O God of hosts, the Holy One of Israel. God is referred to as the Holy One of Israel. So when we say Jerusalem is Ir HaKodesh, it means the city belonging to the holy, meaning belonging to God, or if you may, God's city. The same thing in Hebrew when we say Eretz HaKodesh. It doesn't mean the Holy Land or Terra Sancta, because again, Eretz is in the feminine and Kodesh is in the masculine. So what it means to say is the land of the holy. It's possession, which means God's land. Just like God's people is called God's people, like it says in the book of Deuteronomy, Ki chelek Hashem amo in Parshat Hazinu, because Yaakov chevel nachlato, which means God's portion is his people, Jacob. in a nutshell. So the same thing, Shabbat Hagadol means the Sabbath in which we are meditating on the Yom Hagadol, which we read about in the Haftarah. Now, what is the connection between this Haftarah then and the timeline in which we are in, which is right before Passover? That is because, as I also mentioned previously, that we are working up towards a time where we think about redemption, because the sages said, "B'Nisan nig'alu, u'b'Nisan atadin lihigael," which means in Nisan, originally we were redeemed in Passover 3,500 years ago, and in Nisan, we will, in the future times, we will be redeemed again. So this is the time of redemption, Chodesh Nisan. And therefore, every year we have to think and ponder about Passover and redemption. And therefore, we have this specific chapter in Malachi. So I'd like to go over some things in the chapter. First, now the Haftorah itself only starts a few verses into the chapter, but I will start from the beginning of the chapter, just present a few ideas that I'd like to, and then go to the end of the chapter. So, you might be able to see it here. Chapter 3 in Malachi. First of all, the name of Malachi is a very unusual name. In Hebrew it actually means my angel, which is actually the first verse in Malachi. Hineni sholeach Malachi. Behold, I am sending my angel. Is Malachi the angel which is being sent? Or he's the one who is just telling the story. Now, this is the first verse in chapter 3. Obviously, in chapter 1, it says that Malachi was a prophet who actually mentioned all these things. Just to show you for a moment, if I go to chapter 1, you can see this. As it says, the burden of the word of the Lord to Israel in the hands of Malachi. So, again, the question is, a few times does he use this term Malachi in various associations, which is talking about an angel. Maybe it's not then surprising. The question is the messenger, the malach, or the angel, the malach, actually Malachi himself? I have to mention that the Talmud says that Malachi, was actually Ezra the scribe, who lived at the same time. Malachi, of course, is the last prophet. Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi are the last of prophets, who also merit to see the second coming and during the time of the second temple. And so the Talmud says that it's Ezra. Now, in the book of Ezra, in the book of Nehemiah, they talk about coming back to the land of Israel. But so, as Rav David Kimchi says, the Radak, in his commentary to this chapter, he said the strange thing is, in the book of Ezra, the scribe, Ezra is called a scribe, but he's never called a prophet. And Malachi is definitely a prophet, Malachi. So why exactly would Chazal why would the Talmud associate Malachi specifically with Ezra? So what I would like to propose is, without answering that question completely, is that there is an interesting idea that is proposed here when you do connect the two people, because it's already sort of like, say, philosophically connected in the sense that Malachi is the end of the Hebrew prophets, according to our tradition. We hope in futuristic times that prophecy will come back, but in the meantime, it's the end of the Hebrew prophets. He's the last one. And that's why at the end of this chapter, he says, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi. Right? He says, excuse me, that was chapter 2 instead of 3. Go back to 3. He says, Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi, which means remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, who I gave you at which I gave you at Sinai. Keep in remembrance the teaching of Moses, my servant, the laws, the ordinances which I commanded him according for all of Israel. In other words, if the major prophecy of Moses, not that there were for the Jewish people, was at Sinai, Malachi is sort of like the end of that link or that chain of prophets from Sinai. Not that there weren't prophets before. There was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and even Noah. But as far as when the people became a people and received the Torah, that prophecy continues from Moses all the way to Malachi. And therefore, he connects himself with Moses. After Malachi, you only have sages. You have Chachamim, the first one in this case being Ezra, the scribe. Now, Ezra, the scribe, was considered a very unique sage. He's called a scribe because his ability to understand the law. And according to our tradition, what he did was he collected all the Sifrei Torah, all the various manuscripts of the 5 books of Moses, and compared them from the Babylonian exile, got the best possible edition of the 5 books of Moses, the best version. He's also associated with the Kriyuk Tiv, where the places in the Bible where the word is written one way but pronounced slightly differently, is also associated with Ezra. And the Talmud is very praiseful of Ezra, saying that he was a great scholar, and in a sense, he brought us the Torah a second time. Moses brought it the first time, and Ezra helped, you might say, help us recreate the authentic version of the Torah. So in that sense, he's bringing us the Torah a second time. And of course, in the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, they read the Torah to the people again, which of course gives some indication that there might have been some problems in that 70 years of Babylonia with this issue, which he tries to solve. So this idea of identifying between Malachi and Ezra, in a sense, is already their continuation of a chain. It stops with prophecy and keeps on with the sages. The Talmud says, Chacham adif minavi. A scholar is actually greater than a prophet, in the sense that a prophet can only tell you what God told him or her. But a scholar can deduce many, many things from wisdom, and specifically from the wisdom of the Torah. So, Chacham adif minavi. So I see this association also as an understanding that there's a continuation, but it goes from prophecy into the sages. Now, I'd like to read to you chapter 3, and because chapter 3 is self-explanatory how it connects to Passover when you understand that the month of Nisan, just like we left Egypt in the month of Nisan on the 15th, the night of the 15th, so too futuristically our redemption will begin in this month according to our sages. So I'm going to read. Verse 1. Behold, I send my angel, Sholeach Malachi, and he will clear a way before me. And suddenly the Lord whom you seek will come to his temple. In Hebrew, Heichal, which is like a large chamber, an oracle. And behold, the angel of the covenant whom you desire is coming, says the Lord of hosts. Now this already is a very, if you want to say, messianic or redemptive verse, which is talking about how the world will face new messengers from God. The first one is called the angel. Now, there are a couple of interpretations of the angel, but in other words, angel both means an angel and also, of course, an emissary. And this emissary is going to appear suddenly, and you will seek, and whom you will seek will come to the temple. And there's also the angel of the covenant. So who are these people? And who is the Adon, who is the master? You see, he translates Adon as God, but it's not really, it's actually the master, which means, behold, the one that you are seeking. And then it says the angel of the covenant. I'm just saying that sometimes the Hebrew is not translated very well. Let me give it another shot, and I'll do it myself. Behold, I am sending to you an angel, and he will clear away path. And suddenly, the master shall show up in the temple. He says the Lord, but actually says the master. Adon shall show up in the temple, the one that you are looking for. And then the angel of the covenant, which you desire, will come. Now, the commentaries have interesting ideas here. Rashi doesn't go too much into the details of who they are, but others do. For instance, Abraham ibn Ezra, in his commentary for the 11th century, he says that the first one, Malach, who he's talking to, is called Messiah from the house of Joseph, Mashiach ben Yosef. And then the second one, the Adon, the master, according to Rav David Kimchi, also from the Middle Ages, says that the Adon, the master, is referring to Mashiach ben David, the Messiah of the house of David, as we have traditions both from the Talmud and from the Midrash, ones that you are looking for. Malach HaBrit, angel of the covenant, is Elijah, who is very often referred to as Malach HaBrit, and that's why he is at every circumcision, which is called Brit Milah, of the people of Israel. So you have here all three, let's say, names associated with the redemption. According to Ibn Ezra, Malachi being Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah from the house of Joseph, which I'm not going to explain at this moment, and the Adon, the master, the Messiah from the house of David, from the family of David, who becomes the king, and the Malach HaBrit, the angel of the covenant, which is associated with Elijah, the prophet. So already this first verse puts us into this this idea of the period of redemption, to the Messianic age, or the period of redemption. Future is the period of redemption, which I wrote a whole book about. But there's a lot of sources concerning this towards the, yes. And who can abide the day of this coming? Who will stand up when it appears? For it's like fire, refines like a fuller's soap. In other words, people will not be able to stand up, because it will refine and punish those who deserve punishment. And he shall sit refining and purifying silver, and shall purify the children of Levi. Don't mean actually the children, it means the people of the tribe of Levi. Why the tribe of Levi? Because they have to work in the temple. So they're the first ones who have to be told what to do in order to purify their actions. He shall purge them as gold and silver, and they shall bring up offerings for the Lord in righteousness. Then the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem, because remember at this time there were no more northern Israel, shall be pleasant to the Lord in the days of old and former years. I want to point out before I continue, Rabbi Kook writes in his Sidur, says, notice that it says the offerings and uses the term mincha. Mincha means an offering, but also sometimes means a flour offering in the book of Leviticus. You know, Rabbi Kook was very, has a lot of writings about vegetarianism, and also believes in futuristic time. Mankind will be vegetarian and not carnivore anymore. But I just want to mention this for those who want to look into it more. There's a lot on Rav Kook's relationship to vegetarianism, Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cohen Kook. I continue. I will approach you in judgment. This is where the Haftorah starts in this previous verse, chapter 4. I will be a swift witness against sorcerers, adulterers, those who swear falsely, those who withhold the sages of people who labored for them, those who hurt widows and fatherless, those who pervert the rights of the stranger, those who fear me not. All of these will I stand in judgment over them. Here comes a very important verse. For I, God, have not changed, lo shaniti, and will never change. And you, the sons of Jacob, will never reach an end. Lo chlitem. I've never changed, you've never reached an end, and that's the way it shall continue. Now, this has two meanings. For me, the simple meaning means, just like God never changes, the history of the world will always have the people of Jacob, the people of Israel, what we call today the Jews, will always be around because we have a role to play. There's a second meaning to this verse that some of the Parshanim say, some of the commentaries. Just like God never changed, which means I always know the difference between right and wrong. And so you, the children of Jacob, lo chlitem, you will never be decimated. I will never overblame you for your wrongdoings. We will always find a way to atone and forgive. I mentioned also when I talked about the book of Isaiah. For that from the days of your fathers you have departed from my laws. I said, return to me. And if you return to me, I will return to you. Meaning, I've always said to you that I can do this if you return to me. Because can a man rob God? You robbed me. You didn't give the tithes. You didn't give the truma to the Levi and the Kohen. You might be cursing, but in the end, uh, the whole nation is robbing me from these ma'asrot. So bring the tithes. Just bring them. Bring them into my house, to the temple. It'll be given to the Levites. It'll be the Kohens. And you can even test me. V'chanuni nabazot, amar Hashem tzvaot. Test me now, says the Lord. If you do that, I will open for you the arubot hashamayim, the portals of heaven, and pour down blessing until they're unlimited blessing. Ad vidai. And I will rebuke you for your sake, everything I say. And then there will be no destruction of the fruits of the land, neither shall the wine cast its fruit before its time. Now, a very important, by the way, this is also an interesting verse, this idea of test me. Talmud says, you're not allowed to test God, but in this you're allowed to because it says so right here in the prophet. What does it mean, test me? Which means if you give these tithes to Levi and the Kohen, which is an act of tzedakah, of charity, you will be blessed. You'll think you're giving money away, you'll get twice as much because you'll receive blessing. Many people think this applies in general to the idea of charity. When you give, you receive, not only in a feeling, but it also, when you give, you become a source of giving. And that source of giving brings you blessing. And so it's interesting that this is the one thing that the Talmud says you're allowed to test God, because God says, give it a try. Bring these charities that you have to, Maaser Ksafim, Maaser for the Levi, the Truma for the Kohen, and you'll see it'll bring you blessing. Then, chapter 12, verse 12. All the nations shall praise you. You shall be a desirable land, says the Lord of hosts. Now, nowadays, we look around, it doesn't look like it. There's so many nations where anti-Semitism has arisen from its and become again politically correct after years since the Second World War, when all anti-Semitism was not politically correct. It's come back because of certain elements which are trying to fan the fire and also produce the fire. And the prophet says this will not continue. Eventually, the truth will stand out, the falsehoods will fall, and the nations shall pray you. Your land will be a desirable land, says the Lord of hosts. And it's starting to happen too. There'll be many, many changes. The Arabs will stand together with us eventually because they will realize the value of our connection to them. And we will be seeking what we both believe in, which is a connection to God. And the Christians will reconnect with us too, through that same thing. All the monotheistic religions who were born out of Judaism will reconnect. This will happen. And you will be praised by the nations because the nations will understand how the Jewish people in Judaism is bringing blessing into the world and nothing else. Falsities happen. So I'm going to skip to the end. I don't want to make this too long. Then the God-fearing men will speak to one another and God will listen. And it will be written down in a book of remembrance before him of those who feared God and those who valued his name highly. And again, it shall be mine, says God. That day I will make a treasure. and I will have compassion on them, which means on the people of Israel, as a man has compassion on his son who serves him. And you shall return and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and those who did not. For lo, the sun comes glowing like a furnace, and all the audacious sinners and the perpetrators of wickedness will be stubble, but the sun shall burn them up so that they will leave neither root nor branch. The sun of mercy and compassion shall rise with healing on its wings for those who fear my name. Then you shall go forth and be fat as fatted calves, which means blessed with blessing. And you shall crush the wicked, for there will be ash under the soles of your feet, that I will prepare, says the Lord of hosts. Keep in remembrance, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, the ordinances that I commanded in Horeb, and I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of God. This is very interesting, by the way, because there are only two places in our prophets which actually talk about what we would call the resurrection of the dead. One, of course, is Daniel, in the book of Daniel, chapter 12, where it says, many who are sleeping in the dust shall arise. But this one talks about Elijah coming back. Now, it's true, it says about Enoch, Hanoch ben Yared, it says that also that God took him without saying that he died. But you could understand as a metaphor without going into the commentary and his place in the Apocrypha. But concerning Elijah, it says that he went up to the heavens in a fiery chariot. But here is the first time outside rabbinic literature, but actually in the Bible, where it says Elijah will come back. And he will give us the tidings and tell us when he will come back right before this awesome day of God. And that's why it's the Shabbat Hagadol, Yom Hashem Hagadol Vanorah. And what will he do? He shall turn the hearts of fathers back to their children, the hearts of the children back to their fathers. In other words, what he will do will unite the people, unite the generations within the Jewish people, and then hopefully the world will unite too at that time. And may it come soon. And I wish everybody peace upon Israel, upon the whole world. Shalom, shalom.